60s, corporate profit rates start to drop. 70s, businesses trying to figure out how do they respond, how do they push back, how do they restore their profitability and recover control. And in 1980, they succeed in electing Ronald Reagan president with a tremendous amount of corporate backing, or rather reactionary corporate backing. And one of the things that Reagan used to get himself elected was the story about the welfare queen. Do people remember? Who is the welfare queen? Who remembers?
Black woman driving a Cadillac.
Black woman driving a Cadillac.
Having lots of babies so she can get more money.
So on welfare, collecting multiple aliases, collecting dozens of welfare checks from the government. So the reason why this had resonance and why this created Reagan Democrats, like working class whites who voted for Reagan, was that it gave them an explanation for why they weren't getting ahead. People had been seeing, been working for 30 years and seeing their incomes double over that time. Every year you worked hard, but things got a little better. And all of a sudden in the 70s that stopped. That's when wages flattened out. Who's to blame? What's the narrative? Well, the narrative that he started pushing was primarily parasites. People that aren't working. The reason you're not getting ahead is you're carrying someone on your back, and here's who it is. But the other piece of that story was, and those liberals and bureaucrats in government are so stupid that they are going to keep enabling this parasite to live off you, cut off their supply, cut taxes, starve the beast, don't give them the means to continue to do it. So government became a core part of the targeting in this narrative. And then what they did was actually to proceed to starve government by massively increasing defense spending and cutting taxes on the wealthy and shifting taxes to the rest of us. Here's what's been happening to defense spending. This is more or less current. This is last fiscal year's federal discretionary spending on housing, on veterans benefits, on education, and on the military. It's more than doubled since Bush II took office, and it is continuing to rise under Obama. Over the next 10 years, he's projecting a 25% hike in the defense budget, or the military budget, I should say. So, as you said, this is eating up the resources, as Melman said, that could be used to make our country economically healthy. When you increase spending on defense and cut taxes on wealthy people, this is when Reagan comes in, this is when his tax cuts start to take effect. You create a budget gap, a deficit. But this is what that looks like over time until Clinton restores some of the top marginal tax rates on the wealthy, and the economy revives and tax revenues increase, and the Cold War ends and defense spending goes down for a while. So, it expands under Reagan and Bush Sr. The budget turns positive under Clinton, partly with good luck, partly policy. But this is an incomplete picture. This is just the year-to-year deficit. If you want to look at the debt, you have to add up this year's deficit with this year's deficit with this year's deficit and this year's deficit, and pretty soon alarm bells start to go off and people start to say it's out of control. What happened is that we think deliberately, built up deficits in order to choke off social spending, which looks like this. Increases in military spending, tax cuts for the wealthy. That's like maxing out on your credit card while you lose your job. Something's got to give. And what gives is housing, health care, welfare, public services that people use, money for states and cities to support the services that they deliver. And what you do if you pile up a big enough deficit is that you condition the behavior of both political parties. Clinton comes in and he inherits this deficit, and even if he wanted to, which is debatable, he can't increase spending on services for us because the money isn't there and there's this enormous pressure of the deficit. So what you do with this strategy of deliberate deficits is you create a fact on the ground that politicians have to deal with regardless of who they are. And Bush 2 did it to the nth.
Just gonna say, well, Clinton established, like, he made a great president. Not only did he end like social spending, he created a low-wage workforce by forcing all of these people into big box sales and retailers, and they had been screaming for the need of that. So Walmart and everybody else got $9 an hour employees because they no longer got the government, but they still were collecting.
As Mark Brenner said in the last session, it's a bipartisan policy.
Even Eisenhower warned about the rising military-industrial complex, and that was back when, in the late 50s, early 1960s.
Yep.
He saw it coming.
Yep. What I'll do, if you promise not to look at it now, and this is my one piece of shameless promotion, is to pass around a brochure for a campaign that I'm involved with back home in Boston to cut military spending systematically, 25% we're saying, and use that to create jobs and fund services and bail us out of the recession. So, there's an action step here.
I would just point out, David Stockman was Ronald Reagan's budget director. He called it a strategic deficit. So it's an opportunity. And more recently, Naomi Klein calls this kind of approach disaster capitalism. You're using crises to move your program forward. You're neoliberal.
So, I'm getting there. It's a complicated story, which I'm hoping you will simplify when we wrap up this section. But Grover Norquist, people know who he is. Famous quote up here. I don't hate government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I can drag it into the bathroom and shrink it and ground it in the bathtub. So here's the agenda. We call it shrink, shift, and shaft. You shrink government. You shift taxes from wealthy people and corporations onto working people, and you shaft them by cutting services that they use. The really smart thing about this strategy is that working people are getting a raw deal. They're seeing their share of taxes increase while they're getting less for their money. The services are getting cut. It's a raw deal, and you can list them in your tax cut crusade because government isn't working.
There's something else too, and that is that you set up government in a way that's bound to fail.
Exactly.
And so you erode public support for government programs by making sure that they're underfunded and bound to fail.
And
that's part of the strategic thing that they were very interested in doing and successfully done.
And our soundbite for that, which we encourage you to use in conversations, is called defame, defund, deregulate, and privatize. So first you defame government. You tear it down. Government's responsible for all these problems. Then that allows you to get the support to defund it. The public doesn't like government. They're blaming it. Let's cut our taxes. Then you deregulate it so that you can privatize the profitable portions of it.